God has a sleep disorder. That's our theme today. You like that graphic, can't sleep? Now that might be you on any given night, but that's not the point. That's God every night. God can't sleep. The Old Testament rabbis, they read through Psalm 121 and they debated among themselves why God can't sleep. Why can't Yahweh, the creator of the heavens and the earth, why does he neither slumber nor sleep? And they decided God has a sleep disorder because there is so much trouble in the world. And you look around today and you know there's trouble. And thank goodness God has a sleep disorder and he's always alert. And so that's our theme today. We look at Psalm 121 and Psalm 23. First, a question. Are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? Are you an optimist? You see the good side of things, or a pessimist where it feels like the sky is always falling? I heard this great story about a tiger trainer who was an optimist, and I guess if you're a tiger trainer, you've got to be an optimist, right? Can't be a pessimist getting in the cage. Well, he went into the cage with the tigers, and a hush came over the crowd, as it usually did when the doors were locked shut behind him. The trainer put the tigers through their routine, entertaining the crowd, but suddenly there was a pop, and electricity went out, and everything went dark. And the trainer was locked inside the cage in total darkness. A moment or two later, the lights came back on, and the show went on, and everything was fine. The tiger trainer was interviewed by a television station afterwards. They asked him, well, what happened, and were you scared? He says, I was scared to death. He said, but then I realized in the dark there, even though the tigers could see me with their night vision, they can smell me, all their senses, even though that was happening, they didn't know I couldn't see them. And so I just did what I usually do with the chair and the whip, and I talked to them. Now that's an optimist. That's an optimist. You just keep on going even when the tigers and the dark surrounds you. Someone has defined the difference between an optimist and a pessimist this way. When trouble comes, the pessimist says it's enough to make a person lose his religion, while the optimist says it's enough to make a person use his religion. As God's people, we should be optimistic. But we're not always optimistic, are we? Sometimes we're pessimistic and we struggle. And so if you're feeling helpless and need help, if you're feeling hopeless and need a little bit of hope, I offer up these two Psalms today to help you get through whatever it is you need to get through. These are printed out for you, the traditional version, for you to take home. And much like a doctor might give you a prescription, here's my prescription. If you need help and you feel helpless, if you need hope and you feel hopeless, pray these two Psalms 3 times a day. It's not hard to do, morning, noon, and night. Or pray them once a day if you just need a little bit of help, or twice a day. But if you pray them and think them and believe them, I think they'll make a difference for you. So that's your prescription for this week, this month, if you need that. Psalm 121. Let's take a look at that first. And we'll look at that a little more carefully than we look at Psalm 23, since we know Psalm 23 so very, very well. Basically, the theme of the psalm is, where do you go to find help? Where do you find help? The psalmist has done what so many of us do when we need to look for help, where to find help. We look everywhere. And it begins, the psalm, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where's my help going to come from? I'm looking to everywhere I can to see where I can get help. I'm trying to figure it out on my own, pull myself up by my own bootstraps maybe. All my avenues are dead ends. I can't figure out where to go with the terror and the trouble as it comes upon me. One thing that's common to every person on this planet, that's you and me, is we have problems. We all have problems. We might be optimistic, hopefully we are. We might be pessimistic, but we have problems. Institutions have problems. Our government has problems, right? The answer to our problems is not going to be found in the hills or mountains of human reason, self-reliance, but rather the answer is found in the heaven of a holy Lord. And that's what Psalm 121 does for us. Reminds us where we need to go find help. It's with God. It's with God who created the heavens and the earth. And so when you feel the ground beneath your feet shaking and quaking, there are three things that God will always give you, we find in the psalm here, that will help you to overcome and be victorious. First of all is security. We get security from this psalm. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. After the psalmist is looking everywhere, he realizes my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Can you think of anyone you'd rather have watching out for you and be your helper and protector than the God who made the heavens and the earth? I'm talking about the God who is higher than the hills and the mountains. He's above all armies. He's above all governments. He has created everything. I'm talking about the God who created the world with just one word. And this is the security we're promised here in Psalm 121. If we would just realize how powerful this God is. And he has a sleep disorder. We'll get to that. These all go together. If we would realize that, that would give us a lot of hope and help just when we feel helpless or hopeless. So we are promised security here and stability. Stability. He will not allow your foot to be moved. Just a simple little line there. We might skip over it. He won't let your foot be moved. Every now and again, the adversities of life may land a roundhouse punch square on your face and knock you back. You might get staggered by the difficulty. You might be overcome by the trials or the tribulations or the tests in front of you. But the psalm says God will not allow your foot to be moved. You're not going to be knocked down for the count. The Hebrew word here really for move means to slip. You're not going to slip backwards. You're going to hold your ground. One of the great promises in the Bible is Proverbs chapter 3, verses 25 and 26. Do not be afraid of a sudden terror, nor trouble from the wicked when it comes, for the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. Again, our feet are placed well beneath us, and God will make us firm in our stand. We are standing on a solid rock, and when others are falling like flies, the person of God who stands for God cannot and will not fall. So Psalm 121 says we have security from the creator of the heavens and the earth. We have stability. Our feet can't even be moved, or we can't slip and fall fully down. And you are given serenity. He who keeps you will neither slumber nor sleep. What a great Bible verse that is. If nothing else today, remember Psalm 121 is where you can go to find God who has a sleep disorder. God is on watch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 100 weeks a century, so on and so on. He never sleeps. Even the best parent among us, or the best grandparent, we cannot keep watch over our kids and our grandkids 24/7. But God does just that. And that should give us serenity. God gives us security. God gives us stability. God gives us serenity. And then Psalm 121 goes on a little more, and it's sort of an odd Bible verse. And I want to just kind of bring out the meaning for you. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. What does that mean, shade at your right hand? Shade or protection. Remember last week we were talking about the shield of faith. And ancient warriors would carry shields. And we've seen it in the movies, right? And they would usually carry the shield in their left hand. And that would give them great protection. The shield would often be dipped in water so that the fiery arrows of the enemy would not inflame your shield. With the right hand, they would hold the sword. So on the right side, you had vulnerability. There was a lot you did with your right side, but the right side is where you could really get hurt. And what the psalmist is saying, that we carry our shield in our left hand, a shield of faith, as I mentioned last week, but also I'd call it a shield of common sense in life. We need a shield of common sense just to get through life. But in navigating so much of life, our right side is exposed. And the psalmist here says that where your greatest weakness is, that's particularly where God is going to protect you. The shade at your right hand. God is our shield. What a beautiful way to understand God. So Psalm 121 here is so important, I think, for us to remember it, to know where it is at in the Bible, to pray it. We receive security, stability, serenity from God, and God is our shield, our shade at our right hand, if you will, protecting us where we feel most weak. Psalm 23, I think these go together. Psalm 23. Psalm 121, the question really is, where does my help come from? And it explains where our help comes from. Psalm 23 is about not so much where the help comes from, but how the help gets us through where we need to get through, getting through dark valleys. We all love Psalm 23. It talks about God as a good shepherd leading us beside green meadows and still waters, but we all know that's not true every day in life. There are tough places in life we walk through. And the psalmist says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the actual Hebrew is the darkest, the gloomiest valley possible. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. God is with us. He can't sleep, and he's with us, going through dark valleys. And there's not one of us here that wants to walk through a dark valley. We want to go around the valley. We want to use human reason to figure out how to go around the valley. We want to fly over it, skip over it, just somehow not go through the valley. But the psalmist says there are valleys, and they can be very, very dark. God doesn't sleep. He doesn't slumber. Walks with us through these dark valleys. And then again, just like that Bible verse in Psalm 121, the Lord is your shade at your right hand that we don't always catch. There's a verse here in Psalm 23 we don't always catch. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. In other words, we're going through dark places. We don't get to skip it, but we can make it through it. Without a doubt, things may knock us down. Without a doubt, it may slow us down, but we will get through it. And the promise here is, even as you're going through a dark valley, God prepares a table before you. In other words, it's like you get a Thanksgiving meal in the midst of your worst circumstances where you can celebrate with God. That's the goodness and the bounty of God. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. Not many of us would want olive oil poured over our head, but in the Old Testament, that was a sign of great, great blessing. And so you get a table, a banqueting table, great, great blessing of anointment with oil, and your cup overflows. And we all know what that means, and we want blessings to overflow in our life. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. Pray through Psalm 121 and Psalm 23. If you have need of it, pray it 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. And you can even pray these Psalms thinking about someone else. For instance, the Lord is my shepherd. You've got a family member that needs prayer. The Lord is so-and-so's shepherd, right? Use this psalm as a way to pray for someone else. Or I lift up my eyes to the hills. My help comes from the Lord. Pray for a family member or friend. So-and-so's help comes from the Lord. These are great psalms to pray. So I lift these up to you today. God has a sleep disorder. God's always awake. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't sleep, God's up with you. He maybe is waiting for you to wake up so you can pray. Look to God for help. He's there for you. And God definitely, He promises that He will get us through the dark valleys. Amen.